The non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced.
Up next, we got to check in on the Democratic Party because they've apparently learned absolutely nothing. We already covered their chaotic and bizarre forum for their candidates to be DNC chair that was repeatedly disrupted over and over again by climate crazies and featured a lot of the identity politics nonsense they, if they had any sense, would have left back in the past, like in 2020. But they actually went on and had the vote and selected their DNC chair and their 3 vice chairs, and some more hilarity ensued. First, they opened up this whole ceremony with, yes, a land acknowledgement.
The Democratic National Committee wishes to acknowledge that we gather together to state our values on lands that have been stewarded through many centuries by the ancestors and the descendants of tribal nations who have been here since time immemorial. We honor the communities native to this continent and recognize that our country was built on indigenous lands and hope.
This is so cringe to me, and my philosophy on these has always been very simple. Give it back or shut up. It's just such a meaningless virtue signal to say we honor the indigenous people whose lands were stolen. How? Give it to them and be quiet or stop talking about it. You're just virtue signaling. You're doing nothing to help them. In fact, you're kind of rubbing it in their face. Then there was this whole kind of chaotic moment where they had a non-binary candidate for DNC vice chair. Ha! Gay! And it messed up their gender equity rules that they have in their elections, where they have to have equal genders of candidates on each vote or something complicated. Take a listen to the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, tying himself into pretzels trying to explain this rule.
The rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. To ensure our process accounts for male, female, and non-binary candidates, we conferred with our RBC co-chair, our LGBT caucus co-chair, and others to ensure that the process is inclusive and meets the gender balance requirements in our rules.
I've watched this multiple times. I've Googled, I've asked ChatGPT, still can't quite figure out what the heck is going on there, but I did find their rules about gender parity, and the DNC specifically orders that their officers must be as equally divided as practical according to gender, and that non-binary gender candidates and officers shall not be counted as either male or female, even though they are still male or female. So to me, that was just kind of a microcosm of how deeply ingrained a lot of this identitarian rot is in the Democratic Party. They can't even select their own leaders based on merit. They have to do it in part based on this kind of never-ending game of identity hopscotch. But here's the most telling development of the DNC selecting their new officers. The selection of a incredibly cringeworthy liberal activist named David Hogg to be one of their new vice chairs. Now, if you're a normie, you probably don't know who David Hogg is, but I unfortunately do. As somebody who's been plugged into politics for a long time, he made a name for himself because he went to the Parkland High School that was so infamously victimized by a school shooting. And he became, of course, my heart goes out to him for that experience and all the people he knows who were harmed. But he became a very prominent Democratic partisan anti-gun activist in the aftermath of that tragedy and built a career for himself in Democratic politics. But he was almost one of the most cartoonishly woke and absurd avatars on the Democratic side of online discourse. And now they're selecting him for a leadership role in their party? Let's go through some of David Hogg's greatest hits to give you a sense of who exactly this guy is. He tweeted in 2022, "If you need a license to kill deer, why don't you need one to kill humans?" He really thought he ate with that. He really thought he just solved gun violence in America. That if we just required murderers to get licenses before they could kill people, they wouldn't break the law, even though they're already breaking the law, and much more serious laws than licensing regimes. Wild stuff, but that's the caliber of the activism he brought to the gun control debate. This is another tweet from him in 2020. This is a tweet for the founders of the gun violence prevention movement, started centuries ago by almost entirely Black, brown, and indigenous LGBTQ women and non-binary people that never got on the news or in most history books. We may not know all your names, but thank you. I still have no idea what the heck he's talking about. The gun violence prevention movement started centuries ago by non-binary, indigenous, LGBTQ women, and you're so confident of this thing you made up, but you don't know the names of any of these people, apparently. So how do you know they exist? Because it doesn't sound like a thing. This is my personal favorite David Hogg tweet. He responded to a New York Post story titled, "These three little words are a big turn on," and he wrote, "Abolish the police." Yes, remember that? That thing that Democrats never ever supported? Yeah, he was all in on that one. But here's my favorite David Hogg tweet, I think, because it's actually remarkably self-aware. In 2022, he wrote, "I'm one of the most politically toxic people in the country. I mean, go on. And I'm too radical for American politics. No, I'm not running for office. We have enough straight white men in power. It'd be nice to see some people who actually look like our country and not privilege. Because straight white men don't look like our country. Pretty sure there's a lot of them here, actually." Obviously, running for a position of leadership in the Democratic Party is different than running for like a governmental office like Senate or congressman, but it's not that different. If you're too politically toxic to be an elected leader of the Democrats, how are you not too politically toxic to be in charge of the party? And if you think there are enough straight white men in power, so I need to sit this one out and acknowledge my privilege, what happened to that? That was just a couple years ago, and now you're out here taking an important leadership position that could go to a minority, POC, oppressed, indigenous, two-spirit, non-binary, sapiosexual, whatever. Like, I'm joking, but I'm also not. If you're going to talk this absurd talk, I think it's fair for us to expect you to walk the walk, which David Hogg is apparently unwilling to do. But this is about more than just this one guy. To me, it's kind of an example that the Democratic Party is not learning the right lessons, to say the very least. I mean, they had another candidate for DNC vice chair named Adam Frisch, who nearly beat Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert in 2022 in a deep red district as a rural outreach candidate. He only got 5 votes, whereas David Hogg went on to become one of the new vice chairs. So you have a rural Democrat who can appeal in a deep red district, but is still a Democrat and still liberal, or the woke activist kid who thinks indigenous LGBTQ women founded the gun control movement and that straight white men need to take a back seat and that we should abolish the police. And the Democrats went with that dude. That is not a serious party. That is not a party that wants to win, that is ready to move on from toxic identitarian radicalism and focus on bread and butter issues. And it just, to me, shows they've learned nothing and they're setting themselves up for continued failure. And honestly, I laugh at that to some extent, but I don't want that. I don't relish that. I want this country to have 2 sane, moderate parties, a center-left party and a center-right party. But that's not where we're headed. And all I can do at this point is grab some popcorn and enjoy watching the shit show, because if I don't laugh, I might cry.